Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And special guest with us today, Mary Byler. Mary, hello.
Hello.
And Mary is, if you don't know who she is yet, she is a former Amish abuse survivor of child sexual abuse. And today we're going to talk about, we're going to start talking about things that we should say to victims, ways that we should respond. And then in the second part, we're going to talk about things not to say, things not to do. And then Mary will get into some of the, I think, horrific details of how your abuse was handled. And basically, you are a case study for everything not to do within a community, within a religious community. Not you, but your community. So, Mary, why don't we just start? Just dig right in and talk about some of the points, ways that you wished people had responded whenever you disclosed your abuse.
Well, first, let me thank you guys for having me here. I appreciate all of your support, all of the work you guys have done. But I guess like the very first thing is like just saying I believe you, or like it took a lot of guts, or it took a lot of courage to just even say that, or even saying it's not your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve this.
Yeah.
And if it's a child, like think about this. A child cannot consent. By law, a child cannot consent. So if you're blaming a child for being sexually assaulted, that's a little bit harmful to the child spiritually.
Yeah.
Telling them, like, you're not alone. I care about you. You're also not alone because there's other people that have survived abuse. Making sure that you talk about, I'm here for you. I'm here to listen to you. Do whatever I can to help you through this. I will support you to the best of my abilities. And even saying, I'm sorry this happened. It shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Boy, that's a huge one.
I think that is enormous. I really do. And we don't hear that expressed often, that I'm just so sorry this happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important.
Another thing is just reassuring, let me just reiterate, like, believe them.
Yeah.
Believe them. You can even ask, like, what do you need right now? And if they can't they don't have an answer for that, here's the thing. Well, if you think of something, let me know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
You can also say, I don't know, like sometimes like people try to tell like abuse survivors like exactly what they need to do. That's also not really a great idea. Instead, what you can say is, I don't really know, but here's your options. These are the options.
Or they tell them how to feel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And don't tell them how to feel.
You should be grateful. You should be joyful, like that. Yeah. Don't tell victims ever how they should feel, but validate how they are feeling.
Which, yeah, that absolutely that. Like,
and those emotions could be all over the place. I remember.
They will be all over the place.
You're going to have that.
Yeah. I had everything. I mean, simultaneously sometimes, from explosive anger to very deep sorrow. And then other times where just memories flooded back, where you feel, you start to smile a little bit, and then you feel gross and dirty for feeling that way about the perpetrator. And, so like all of those things should be validated and say, however you're feeling, express yourself and let it out.
Right.
Reassure the survivor that the emotions, the range of emotions that they're feeling is appropriate. There's no right or wrong emotion to feel. I think that's kind of what you were getting at, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That reassurance and validation.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, back up just one behind there. When you said we can ask, what do you need? And you said sometimes, there's not an answer. That happens a lot, I think, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what we need when we're hurting. We wish we knew, but we don't always know what we need. And, it's a really hard thing to be hurting so badly, but, we don't know what would help, what we need. Yeah.
Well, and part of the difficulty is when you come from a close community, and practically the majority of decisions that are made for you. Right. So you don't make decisions. So you don't even know. You have no idea, and that's why it can take a while. But eventually, they might, they'll be able to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And plus, that's not to add the trauma on top of that. It's very common for people to not know what they need in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What came to my mind? Yeah, when you said that, Mary, what came to my mind is all the times that I hear the browbeating with the Bible. People, especially in, I think, conservative religious communities, feel the need to always have an answer because, the Bible is black and white. And that legalistic view that God always has an answer. The Bible has all the answers to life. And so there's no humility on the part of so many religious people to just say, you know what, I don't have any answers for what happened to you, why it happened, how it happened. I just don't know.
Or how to help.
Yeah, or how to help you at this point.
How to help you feel better right now.
But instead it's, what a lot of victims fears. Yeah. You should do this, or God uses these things for good, and it's those cliches that are so hurtful for victims, and sometimes you just can't make sense out of evil. You just can't make sense out of it.
You really can't. Here's another thing is when you're talking to survivors, if you have a survivor collapsing on the floor, get down on their level. Another thing is really, 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 it is imperative that if you feel the need to comfort them or touch them in any way, one, you ask permission. You get consent from that person every time, not just the first time or the second time, every single time. You ask them, is it okay if I hug you? I'd really like to give you a hug. And if they say no, don't get upset with them. They have never had the opportunity to establish appropriate boundaries for themselves. And now they're trying to do that.
So
and that's okay.
Yeah.
Honor that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, let people know that they don't have to go into detail about what happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important because when we demand, details, you tell me what happened. You tell me how this happened. It's
violating.
It is violating.
It's re-traumatizing the victim.
That's it. It is re-traumatizing, and it's so wrong. And I'm so glad you brought that up.
And it forces the victim to relive events that they may not be ready to relive. They may not have processed that in a way that they can actually speak about it without going, for lack of a better term, some people commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful how you talk to victims.
That's just how sensitive it is. And I'm just so thankful you're willing to talk about these things because so much wrong has been done by those of us who simply have said the wrong thing and have demanded the wrong thing of victims of abuse.
Well, I'm thankful you guys are here to talk with me about it.
Yeah.
Because, truthfully, like, this is legitimately Clara. Let me just put this out there for the people that don't know. Clara and Jimmy both, like, practically did the exact opposite in their case that my family and community did. It's like a stark contrast. Going back to our topic right now, where we're talking about victims, I want to talk a little bit about your nonverbal body language. Because sometimes, like, you want to look at the person as if you see them, kind of nod your head, don't cross your eyes, don't cross your knees or your arms or things like that. Nodding. Another important thing is like allowing for silence in the conversation is when you allow for silence, that gives them space to feel like they're in a safe place. And when you give them space to feel like they're in a safe place, people may legitimately be able to figure out how they feel about something they have never processed.
That's so powerful.
It is.
Yeah. Just allowing that awkward dead space and let them process and don't feel the need to jump in there. Because I think part of that's human nature, where we don't like silence, especially in those really super high emotionally charged environments. It's just really uncomfortable. But that's okay,
Right.
And you're right. That allows the survivor to think and to process and to not feel rushed or obligated to talk and to spill their guts, because maybe they're just thinking and processing. Yeah, that's super important.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I got everything on the list of like how to. You think I missed anything?
I don't think so.
I don't know. That is a really good that is a really good list.
It is.
So important. I mean, honestly, as you're telling me these things, I'm thinking about how many stories I hear where people do the exact opposite. And these are not, like, as you come up with this list, it's not rocket science. This is not like some profound mystery that you had to search the ends of the universe to find. It's common sense.
Well, what do you say to the churches who will like take the victim and put them before like 2 or 3 men and require them to tell their part of the story? What do you say about that?
It's absolutely traumatizing, especially if the perpetrator, if the abuser was a male. You're now forcing them in front of more males who are dominating them, whether they think they are or not. Just their presence is intimidating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that actually, I literally sat in an Amish church right before I got out, and I listened to a 17-year-old victim confess that she enticed. So this is not just in front of 1 or 2 men, it's in front of the entire church. Get on her knees and confess that she sinned greatly before God and the church because she enticed her rapist to rape her.
Oh.
Wow.
Excuse me?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
mean, we can. I mean, I think here's a good point to transition and have you share part of your story, and just talk about your experience, because your abuse began very young. Your abuse began when you said your earliest memories were maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Right. That's right.
I mean, that's my youngest son's age. He's 5 years old, and I look at him and I just think, to have a grown man molesting and raping him at his age is like, I still can't wrap my mind around it. And I've been doing advocacy for 10 years, for a decade. And I still can't wrap my mind around it. How traumatizing, how terrifying, how awful
evil,
that is.
Let's just say plain rotten evil. It is evil to do anything to harm a child. And to force someone to get on her knees before a group of people and say that she was the reason that this happened, God forbid those men that force that upon that girl. And I mean that it's wrong. It's so wrong.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you,
Everything
Claire.
about it is. This conversation, Jimmy, you are so right, should not even have to be had when we care on even the minutest level about one another. We don't say those things. We don't do those things. We don't force.
We don't
a
even think
wounded,
those things.
Hurting person.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that. And to have a human do this to a child, no. That's evil at the worst. It truly is. And that's why I think we will continue to do this work and continue to fight for this. We will continue with every breath in us. It's just that.
Well, I have to believe that we can stand together and make a difference.
Yes.
I have to believe that there are enough people that see these actions for the atrocities that they are, that we can all stand together and we can raise awareness. We can create education. We can use the education already out there, and we can make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to believe that. Otherwise, I feel like I would lose any kind of hope. And that would send me down a really dark path.
Yeah.
I believe any constructive change begins with education. It has to begin at some point. And education is the beginning of, I think,
Right.
change always. Yes. So I think you're right on with that.
I have to believe it.
Yes.
But anyways,
Yep.
so I guess maybe I should start talking about why I have to believe that, or I would go down a dark path.
Yeah.
Because, so like Jimmy was talking about, some of my earliest memories are of being sexually assaulted by my biological father. He was killed when I was 5, and this is the only reason that I even know about the age that I was, is because he was killed right after I turned 5. And the thing about that is like that in and of itself, and I wrote about it a little bit, just the fact of like growing up in an environment where, you don't speak ill of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so every birthday that would have been his birthday and every anniversary of his death, I heard all these stories about what an amazing person he was. What a good Amish person he was. And I don't even know how to explain. How can you reconcile that as a child, where this person who was your bad guy was killed and went away forever? This was the villain in your story. This is the one that climbed into your bed in the middle of the night and hurt you. This is the one who went and I shit you not, like I told, I'm sorry, that was a bad word. I told,
you have freedom on our podcast.
I told my biological mother when this happened, and the conversation around that was basically like, well, first she didn't believe it, and I told her to go ask him. Like I remember just stomping my foot and being like, go ask him. And she did, and he admitted it. And she said, well, he's sorry and you have to forgive him. Hold up.
Wow.
You are literally kicking somebody psychologically. If you were telling anybody that was sexually assaulted that they have to forgive somebody, that is kicking them.
Yeah.
If you're not believing them, that is kicking them.
Yeah.
They're already in
100%.
distress. It's unacceptable. That's why we were talking about what to do and what to say.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he died, but the abuse didn't stop. It was started at that time. And kind of like some of I'm not sure exactly how much this is out there, but like we had a leather shop that was in my family for a long time, and we had non-Amish people that came into our leather shop, And I followed this lady around, and I told my parents that I was going to grow up and marry her. And then after that is when the abuse started. So it's almost like it was also a form of conversion therapy.
Hmm.
Again, invalidating, denial, victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I can't even describe the devastation. So I didn't talk about growing up and marrying a woman anymore, but the abuse continued even after he died. And the community's response, I know I told my biological mother at least 4 different times over the span of 15 years that I was being sexually assaulted. She would leave me at home alone with the perpetrators of the abuse, knowing that. And when it continued happening, it was, she and I would disclose again. She said varying things like, "You didn't pray hard enough." Well, but I prayed. That's what I said. And she's like, "But you don't believe hard enough." Because if you truly believed and prayed, this would never happen to you.
Wow.
I'm sorry, you don't say that to a survivor of abuse.
Especially a kid. I mean,
don't care,
anybody, but right, at any
Wow.
age. I mean, that's just a sick, twisted
Wow.
theology that's just, it's gross and wrong.
Exactly.
Am I interpreting this correctly? That if you prayed loud enough, strong enough, full of faith enough that you could have kept the violence away from you? Really?
Yes, you're interpreting that correctly.
Wow.
Never mind the fact that I laid in my bed and cried for hours and begged God to stop this from happening, and it never changed anything.
Oh, no, it wouldn't. Right. Oh, wow.
That is why we don't do that to people. It is horrible.
Yeah.
That is absolutely unhelpful. It is horrible. Don't even talk to somebody if you would think that is okay to say.
No.
Don't.
Yeah.
No.
Just don't open your mouth.
Yeah.
And then another thing is, so like she told me, well, at least you weren't impregnated.
Oh, gosh. Oh, wow.
Like, are you serious? This is what you say to your child that has started menstruating? And then she proceeds to like give me this tea. Like every month I would drink this herbal tea that is, and I found out as an adult, is known to cause abortions. Just so you know.
Wow.
That's the extent of which people will go to hide the evil. So anyways, moving on to when I got out. In 2003, I made contact with a crisis intervention center in the county that I resided in. They provided therapy for me. I did EMDR therapy with them, all kinds of stuff. And through them, I was able to make connections with people outside of the community. And after I got out, the community knew the person that took me, that drove me away, and they would not stop calling her phone number. And because they had a phone line that was on a neighbor's property in the neighbor's name, a separate line in a shack just for them, and they paid the bill. So because they kept calling from that phone number, we had called the sheriff's department and asked them to go out there and tell them, do not call this number. About 6 weeks after I walked out of there, I went to answer the phone one day, and it was one of my perpetrators. I begged him for an hour to go get help for his issues, for his pedophilia, for his sexual assaults that he's been committing. I begged him. And he said, but what if I turn out like you? And I hung up the phone, and I called and reported it.
Good.
Because how can you do that? There was a full investigation done. And when they arrested them, I believe like 2 weeks later, the community officially shunned me. And then we went through all the court hearings, and some of the things that happened throughout the court hearings were just atrocious all over again. It's like when I have my friends being questioned to my whereabouts because anything bad that happened around that community was me. I was told I was pregnant. I was told I was on drugs. I was told I was out there whoring around. I'm just such a disobedient girl.
And you didn't even know those things about yourself, did you, Mary?
Nope. I mean, if I was pregnant, let's be real here. My child wasn't born until I was 22. Yeah. I left the community when I was 19. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day,
well, that's a long pregnancy.
It just doesn't add up. Also, my child only weighed 5 pounds at birth, so I'm gonna let you know right now. Like, yeah. I don't think it was really that long of a pregnancy. Just
Oh. Mary, would you interject a sentence or two for our listeners as to how painful shunning is? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that process. Just that alone, that's not easy to go through. And is it? No, it's not at all.
So when you get shunned by first off, like you're raised in this closed community that considers themselves and holds themselves separate from the world. What happens when you go outside of that community is you're thrust into a culture that you don't understand how to navigate. You don't know what resources you have. Half the time you don't even exist. Some of us leave and we don't even have a social security number or a birth certificate.
Oh, wow.
We don't have a high school education. We only have an 8th grade education. Where we come from, education is generally about 90% of the time really frowned upon. So when you leave and you go outside of that to be shunned by everyone and everybody you've ever known, it's horrible.
You're lost.
And you're not fluent. You're not fluent in English.
No, you're not really. Yes. You're not fluent in English. You're not fluent with the culture. You're not. Yeah, Pennsylvania Dutch is our first language. That's the language I learned first. And it's taken a long time for me to become pretty fluent in English, but hey, there's still times you might hear some of it come out.
Yeah.
That's okay. You know, what I'm hearing is the community keeps the Amish community so tight and such control, with so much control over the community, that should you leave of your own accord, you're totally lost. You're helpless. You're lost. You don't know how to navigate. And that's on purpose.
Yes.
Yes. That's very on purpose. Oh, wow.
Speaking as to that, let me tell you what my biological mother said after I left.
Okay.
Another beautiful thing not to say to people. Well, I pray that your life is so hard.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
And then they have double speak because I want there to be hope for your soul.
Wow.
Which is the implication that there's no hope that your soul can go to heaven.
That's
and that's really, really judgmental. And like I said, like it's double speak and it's not okay. Don't say that to victims.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And here's another thing to point out. So court cases. We had a hearing with a perpetrator of mine that personally told the judge that he sexually assaulted a child close to 75 times. There were 4 busloads. 4. Not 1, not 2, not 3. 4 busloads of Amish people that showed up in court. They paraded them up on the witness stand to testify as to what a good Amish man he is. He has good character.
Oh my God.
It was like it was a production for them. We have to go do this for this man.
Wow. Wow. Oh, this reminds me of a present day stoning that you endured. It really does. It reminds me of setting you up in the center of town and just stoning you, just beating you. And I don't know how you are here with us. I really don't, Mary, but I am so thankful that you are. I am so very thankful that you are. You
I'll
are
amen that.
special. Yes. Oh my.
I have work to do.
Oh.
Anyways, that's the Judge Rossborough in Vernon County, Wisconsin, 2004, looked at them and said, I see all of you crying and testifying for this perpetrator, but I can't help but ask myself how many of you have actually cried for the victim. Which I felt like was a really, really good question.
Very good, yes.
Sure is.
And you know what is that isn't even the worst part. When I went to leave that hearing, my cousin and his cousin, the person that confessed to bestiality in the church about within the last year before I left, followed me out to the car. And even though my friend escorted me, they managed to keep my car door open, had their foot in between my car door, and I couldn't close my car door. And if there hadn't been police coming, running because they were watching, I don't know what would have happened there.
Wow.
It's insane.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, the other component a lot of people might not know about is so you got shunned, you got kicked out of your community, sent hiking in a world that you were not familiar with. So your abusers, who did fortunately get at least some form of justice, though not enough, from our justice system within the Amish church, talk about the most severe punishment for people when they sin. Yeah, I do too. It's the ridiculousness of it is insane.
Let me also back up for just a second.
Yeah, go for it.
So if you talk to an Amish person, they will tell you that I chose to leave the community. It was my choice. Was it really a choice?
No.
Oh, okay. And secondly, let me now talk about the punishment system within the church. First off, if you go out there and you drink until you puke, you get the same punishment as a pedophile or a rapist. Unacceptable.
Yep.
That is unacceptable. They need to hold them accountable and report them.
Amen.
Period.
Yes.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no question marks. It's a period. Done. Not only that, they shun them for 6 weeks. And oftentimes when they do that, what happens, and sometimes people do get shunned for 6 months, but even then, when it happens, the whole time that they're shunned, the perpetrators still have access to the victims and the abuse gets worse.
Because they're not actually shunned, right? Wow. My understanding is they're just not allowed to go to church during that 6 week period.
No. They're allowed to go to church.
Oh, they're still allowed. Wow. Okay.
Wow.
They just have to sit over there at a table by themselves and be separate. They're not allowed to sit at the table with church members and eat with them. This is for most Amish communities. Let me also say for our listeners, I lived in 5 different communities. There is a variety of Amish communities that is like alphabet soup. But anyway, so they're not allowed to sit at the table and eat with church members, even though you're born into the Amish community and they consider that a sin to not be baptized into the church. They don't consider you a member of the church until you get baptized, which is usually around 17 to 20 years of age.
Okay.
And so anyway, so when they shun them, they're also not allowed to take anything from the hand of somebody that was shunned. So like if I was holding a child, I would have to set that child down, and then the person that was taking them would have to pick them up from wherever I set them. They couldn't just take it. Or if I had money to pay my bills, well, they can't accept that.
Okay.
Some people, when they get shunned, they lose their homes because they may be renting from somebody, and then they lose their housing. And that's just horrible by itself. Another thing is some places, some people like they like to, our definition of shunning, my community was primarily that, we don't speak to these people unless we are admonishing them to return to the ways of the church or the ways of your youth.
So in other words, your abusers, the ultimate punishment among the Amish community was simply shunning
for 6 weeks.
For a short period of time.
Which is actually, as somebody who studies and knows abusers really well, works to their favor very much so, because then they can use that and they crank up that sympathy card and they play it big time. Like, I had all this self-reflective time and my goodness, it almost broke me. I'm so broken over what I've done, and I could never bear being shunned again, and then people buy into that and they embrace the abuser. And
you beat me to it.
Yeah.
And not only that, the whole time they still have access. Like if it's a pedophile, still has access to children.
Yeah. It just blows me away. It just really does.
Why would you throw them out there with your children in your church? If you are truly taking care of your flock and leading them the way that you're intended to lead them, why would you throw the pedophiles into your church and allow them free reign? Why?
Yeah. That's what I've been fighting for 10 years. And I asked the question, the same question every time. Why would you allow somebody who they didn't think about doing this to a child? They did it, over and over and over and over again. They did it. They followed through with it. It's like the guy who gets pissed off at somebody and says, I'm gonna intentionally get in my car and I'm gonna mow them over, then I'm gonna back up, I'm gonna drive over them again, I'm gonna put it in drive and back and forth and back and forth. It's one thing to say that, it's another to actually get inside your car, start it up, chase somebody down, and to do it, to follow through with it. And that's what people need to understand. These people, they actually did it.
And not only that, when they get that minimal punishment, even though they play the community even better, what they're also doing is they're learning more tactics to better control their victims.
Right.
And you're literally teaching them to become better at manipulating children.
Yes. That's exactly right.
And it's crazy. It's absolutely asinine to me. It's mind-boggling. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I know
it can't compute.
I know Jimmy was talking about having a 5-year-old, and I will say this, is me having a child really made me look at like I was a child, and it made me understand and comprehend children do not ask for this. They are innocent. They are worthy of our protection. It is our job to protect them.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my, yes. Yes. Oh.
It's
why can't other people see that? I mean, that's what in my mind, like, I understand, I always say bad theology leads to bad practices, but what about common sense? What about those of us who are normal, living, breathing people who just have an ounce of human compassion? Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand how.
What's weird, and it drives me up a tree really insanely crazy, is these same people, if you ask them how they feel about their pets, I guarantee you that they're protecting their dogs better than they've protected their children. And it makes me insane. It makes me insane. It really does.
I'm glad you bring that up, because there's even sayings around it. It's like some Amish men will literally treat their horses better than their wives.
I knew it. Yes. Yep.
And not only that, but if you've done any research into it, there's some Amish people that run puppy mills that are highly illegal and unhealthy, and just, oh my gosh.
Right.
And just my stepfather, for example, he was one of the people that was arrested. He's dead now. What a great loss. He used to beat our horses with shovels and stuff.
That. I just...
So at the end of the day, like, let me tell you what else he did.
Yeah, abusers don't care about any kind of life.
They don't care about life.
Right.
No.
And like he also beat the children with like hacksaws and just all kinds of things. So, I mean, at the end of the day, was he arrested? Yes. Was he charged? Yes. He got like a year's of probation because he physically assaulted me, and he did this whole number where he grabbed my Amish dress collar like this and choked me until I passed out. But according to some of my step-siblings, he was never violent until he married my egg donor. I call baloney. Abusers do not just become abusers overnight.
No.
Right.
Right. Yes. Oh, wow.
Yeah, agreed.
Wow. There's so much in what you're saying, Mary. There is so much meat in what you are saying. It's like, I don't even know where to begin. You know what I'm saying?
I know,
there's so much there, Mary, that needs to be dealt with. And I know you said, you're working on education, and that without knowing that you can do that and bring about change, that you would lose hope. That education needs to be done. People need to be educated and taught. This stuff is so wrong. To condone what's going on within communities such as the Amish community, that's wrong. It's just blatantly wrong. The mistreatment,
and to deny that it's happening.
And to deny.
I mean, we see that in every religious community. There's this radical denial that it's even happening.
Right.
Well, here's a question you mentioned in every religious community. Have I mentioned like the general public's response to like when you start talking about Amish abuse?
No. You and I talked about it whenever we were talking with Audrey, but yeah, you didn't talk about it today.
Let me kind of gloss over that for a little bit, because it's really invalidating and hurtful to survivors. Like if like you start talking about, but he's a good Amish man. He would never do that. Oh, but the Amish make this wonderful bread, pies, furniture. Oh, but they don't use electricity. Oh, but you know how to survive. If you had nothing, you know how to survive. Let me make something perfectly clear to you here. If you feel the need, if you are uncomfortable with somebody disclosing abuse to you, and you feel the need to redirect the conversation away from that to the very community that abandoned them, that shunned them, that harassed them until they moved away, what does that say about you?
Right.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Right. Oh my.
Because it doesn't matter what religion people are. It doesn't matter what culture people are. There are bad people where you get humans, because humans are not perfect.
Right.
We're never going to be perfect.
Right.
And so you get bad people in every group of people. Wherever there's humans, there's going to be bad people.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly right. And it's one of the things that drives me crazy. And I know that the reason we connected, Mary, was you had read my book and just reached out and thanked me and said, as somebody who is not religious, you appreciated the way that I talked about abuse in the religious community. And it's just, I will never understand why religious people completely abandon victims and throw them under the bus and put the blame on them and tell them it's their fault, or deny that it's happening in the religious communities, or thinking that, or teaching that once you step over the threshold inside the church building, now you're safe. It's just, it's not true. It is not true.
I mean, research has shown if you start talking about child abuse, child sexual abuse, who's most likely to be the perpetrator of child sexual abuse? Somebody the child knows.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody the child knows. You have allowed
over 90%
that person
of the time. Yeah.
Right. You have allowed that person, thank you for that statistic, by the way, but you have allowed that person into your life. You trust them. You grant them access to the child. And that's where we're failing as a society. So we have to do better as parents and as protectors of our children.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, your book, let me just say, that was really just incredible. And I want everybody to know how incredible it was, because it was like reading the exact opposite of like what my bishop did. If you look it up, there's an article where my bishop is quoted as saying, like, I don't understand why the church can't just handle this. And I'm just like, this is crazy.
No. Yeah.
You want to handle this. And by the way, my perpetrators are still upstanding, fine Amish men.
No, they're not.
No,
not to me. They're not.
Well, I mean, I'll say this for anybody who's listening and thinks, well, yes, but we could handle it in our church community. No, you can't, and it's not your job. Like these are not just sins; these are crimes. If you're living in the United States of America, you are living, regardless of your religious community, you're living under the same laws as every living, breathing person in the United States of America. It is a crime to sexually assault or to physically assault or to emotionally assault or neglect a child. It's illegal. It's a crime. Churches cannot, should not handle this in-house. You always report it.
Every single time.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't think it's credible. I don't care if you don't believe the person.
Yeah.
If they are lying about it, that goes with them, not you.
That's
you
right.
do your job.
That's
your
right.
job is to protect your flock.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And besides, what are the statistics on false reporting?
It's somewhere around 3%. And it's like 3 to 5%, and a lot of those disclosures are accidental. Just a kid describing something that they have no idea what they're describing, because they don't have a context for sexuality, and so they might say, like, I don't know, trying to think of an example, but it of those 3 to 5% false allegations. The majority of those are accidental disclosures where the kid just doesn't have a framework, doesn't have a context. They investigate, find out, well, it's unfounded. But that's what investigators are for. That's not our job to determine. But it is incredibly rare for somebody to intentionally give a false allegation. It's almost
non-existent, almost.
Yeah, statistically, it's virtually non-existent.
So, yeah, that's another thing. Don't start talking about people false reporting when somebody brings up whatever they're struggling with that day. I think it's really, really hurtful to do that.
Mm-hmm. And the other myth too, I think you and I and Audrey talked about this, where there's this myth that if you've been abused, you're a danger to children, that you're going to turn around and abuse them. That also is not, it's just not true. Survivors of abuse are incredibly protective. Everyone that I've ever met in the last decade, hundreds and hundreds of them, have been incredibly protective of children, both male and female survivors. They're very protective of children. So it's just a myth that if you've been abused, we need to keep you away from kids, not the abuser, but you. Like it's insanity.
How do you even reconcile that kind of line of thinking?
I don't know.
And that's another thing. It's like I applied for a big brother, big sister program because I wanted to give back to the community that helped me. And I was denied because of that.
Yeah.
Which is just like, it's asinine.
Yeah.
It's absolutely asinine. Because I have never met a survivor that like displayed the typical, I mean, I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but a lot of people that have survived abuse, like will have this like gut feelings. I call them gut feelings, but really it's like the hair on the back of your neck rises. Subconsciously, your brain knows that person is a pedophile. That person's a rapist. You can pick them out. You can pick them out because for me, I spent 15 years watching and trying to protect myself and never being successful.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit sensitive to perpetrators.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Right. It's your intuition. The gut feeling it's your intuition. And for survivors of abuse, because they know what tactics the abusers used to abuse them, have it's a finely tuned intuition. So they're more aware when an abuser walks into a room. Typically, they're more aware, and they'll spot an abuser long before any of the rest of us will.
Oh, yeah.
That's incredibly common.
And the other part is the science behind that is that it actually rewires your neurological pathways when you experience trauma like that in your childhood. And so that's why you have that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's important for survivors to actually honor and recognize that. When you feel that way, don't engage with that person.
Right.
Don't allow that person in your life. That's not a good person for you. It's not a good person for anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, Mary, I think as we kind of wrap up, I don't know, maybe I'm putting you on the spot asking this question, but I think it's such a critical one. And maybe if you don't have answers right off the bat, we could always do a follow-up episode. But abuse it's incredibly rampant in the plain communities. We know that because a lot of advocates now are speaking very openly about it. It is a problem. It is a big problem. How can those of us who are not part of the plain communities help to catch the many victims that are trapped inside of those communities? How do we help them?
I mean, Jimmy, that is an excellent question. But that is also there's so many things to be like put out there. Like first off, I feel like people need to understand the Amish culture a little bit better. They need to understand plain culture a little bit better, so that they understand like what they're dealing with. Where are my boundaries? What am I doing? Like where do I need to draw the line? Yeah, we probably have to do a follow-up episode on all of that.
I'd love to do it because I think, and we'll get Audrey on here too.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be perfect.
Yeah.
And then we could really talk about that because at the end of the day, there's just so many things that need to happen. Like Amish children are not taught safe touch, non-safe touch. Half the time, like I didn't have words for my private body parts in our PA Dutch language. 8 out of 9 people that were born Amish did not have words for their private body parts when I asked them privately. That's unacceptable.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's no concept of consent taught. I was told that when I get married, I have to do whatever my husband wants, whenever my husband wants, whether it's in the bedroom or outside of the bedroom. So where is consent being taught?
Yeah.
So there's a need for education inside the community, but there's also a need for education outside of the community so that everybody can kind of create solutions for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely a conversation that's worth having because there are so many. There's just such a high volume of victim survivors that are within those communities that they need help. They really, really need help. And I know there many of you, or maybe not many, but a handful of you advocates who are doing incredible work, providing resources and doing the best you can to help them. But I think we really need to link arms and widen that a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
It was so nice to meet you, Clara, and thank you again, Jenny.
Wonderful to meet you. Absolutely wonderful. I look forward to having you again on the podcast. It'll be awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
most
you,
definitely.
Mary. Thank you.
Well, Mary, thank you. It's been an honor. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron. And check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.